Okay. It's been a long time since my last YouTube video here in this channel. I don't believe I've ever done a video on the Septuagint. I've been using it for quite some time now, ever since I've been doing my research into the Old Testament from the original manuscripts. I'll explain what I mean by that. Mostly everybody today has a basic understanding that the Old Testament was written originally in Hebrew, and the New Testament originally was written in the Greek language. And most people assume that the Old Testament that they're reading is the original Hebrew that was spoken from Moses to the prophets, and that was given to Israel, and they just assume that that's the oldest Hebrew manuscript of the Bible, of the Old Testament. But the Old Testament that probably 95% of the Bibles use, they do not use the original Hebrew, and they use a newer version of Hebrew, which is called the Masoretic text. And that is not the oldest copy of the Old Testament that we could find. The original Hebrew is basically, you really can't access the original Hebrew. You could find parchment scrolls, like in the Dead Sea Scrolls, you'll find bits and pieces of it. There was, an actual Hebrew copy, but it's not really accessible in its entirety today. So the second oldest copy of the Old Testament was what is known as the Greek Septuagint. So you had the original Hebrew that was translated into the Greek language, and they called that the Septuagint. After that, the second oldest one was the Samaritan Pentateuch. That was the first five books of Moses translated into the Samaritan tongue. And then later on, they have what is called the Masoretic text. So I'm just going to give you some examples in the Bible, just giving you an introduction so you can see this. It's very important that when you read the Old Testament, that you read an accurate version of the Old Testament and not some corrupted copy that changes, the meanings of verses, and I highly suspect that there was a motive behind that. Why, these really important verses in the Old Testament were actually changed to not look like, they were actually quoted in the New Testament. So on the right, I have a Bible app that's called eSword, and on the left, I have a Bible app that's called the Olive Tree Bible. I use these versions, these Bible apps pretty often. The one on the left for the Olive Tree, I use a lot for the Strongs, because you can look up meanings of words in the Strong's Concordance. It'll pop up on the screen. And the other one on the right, the eSword, I use a lot because I actually you can download a copy of the Greek Septuagint on eSword for free. And I'm telling you, once you start looking into it, it is very interesting. It's very important because the Septuagint is actually what the apostles and the New Testament writers, they quoted from the Greek Septuagint, not from the Masoretic text. I'm going to show you some examples of that. But here on the right, this is the eSword app. I got different translations on here. For English, for the New Testament, I mostly use the King James. But I want to show you something about another version on the eSword app that you can get. You can also find it in all these other Bible apps. But and I'm going to the book of Hebrews, and I'm going to switch to a version called LITV, which is the literal version. I'm going down to verse 7, and verse 7, it says, "Then I said, Lo, I come, in the heading of the book, it is written of me to do your will, O God." Now, in this italics, in the gray, this is stuff that they put there that wasn't in the text, but it says LXX. That's the Septuagint. That's Roman numeral for the number 70. That's what the Septuagint, it was actually LXX, that copy. It says that you can find that in the Septuagint in Psalm 39, 7 through 9, but then right next to it, it says MT. That's Masoretic text. So the LXX or the Septuagint, the Greek Septuagint, was written way before the Masoretic text. You have the original Hebrew, the Greek Septuagint, and then later on they came up with the newer version of it, which is called the Masoretic text, because the Jews did not like the Greek Septuagint. And later on, I'll go into why I believe that this was so. I believe it's really important, and I think that you got to go back to the older manuscripts to really understand what the Bible actually was foretelling and what it was trying to let us know ahead of time what was supposed to happen. And I believe people try to change the text so that way it could make somebody lose their faith in Jesus as a Messiah. So here, LXX, older manuscript, MT, Masoretic text, newer manuscript. I'm gonna go here on the left. I'm gonna show the same verse. I'm gonna go to Psalm. Let me see, Psalm 39. The book of Psalm, chapter 39, and verse 7. Okay. See, Psalm. Okay, that's in the Septuagint, but I'm gonna go to Psalm 40 and verse 6. So this is where this is quoted. All right, now you tell me if this even makes any sense. I'm going to switch back to the King James on the right so that way you see Hebrews 7, 10 and 7. Then said I, Lo, I come in the volume of the book, it is written me, to do thy will, O God. Above, when he said, sacrifice, it says, no. Let me go back. Let me go back to verse 5. Wherefore, when he comes into the world, he saith, sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body has thou prepared me. Okay, now we got to pay really, really close attention at this. This is what the writer of Hebrews 10 and 5, he said that sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body has thou prepared me. Now let's look at that in the Masoretic text of Psalm 40, 40 and verse 6. Sacrifice and offering thou didst not desire, mine ears has thou opened. Does that even sound anything close to what the writer of Hebrews said? Compare them. You try to make it make sense. No, Hebrews 10 and 5 said when they were quoting from the Old Testament, they quoted sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body has thou prepared me. That's not what was written in the Masoretic text. Now, let's look at the Septuagint version of that same verse. I'm going to go to, that was Psalm 40 and 6. Psalm 40 and 6. Verse 6. Now I'm going to switch over to Septuagint, and this app is called Brenton. Now you look at this. Sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body has thou prepared me. That's way different than the Masoretic text. The Masoretic text says, my ears have you opened. The Septuagint quotes it exactly like we find in Hebrews chapter 10 and verse 4. But a body has prepared me. So something's definitely up with the text. You got to make sure that you read the same thing that they were quoting from. They were not quoting from the King James Old Testament Masoretic text. And it's not just the King James. Like I said, just about every single copy or translation, they translate or whatever they want to call it, interpret, whatever, their Old Testament from the Masoretic text and not from the Greek Septuagint. It is very rare for people to use the Greek Septuagint as the Old Testament. So many people got different reasons why they think that, oh no, let's not read the Septuagint. Oh, they got extra books and stuff like that. Different phobias, which I'll explain, as we go through, introducing the Septuagint, and I'll show you how, like, I started looking into the Septuagint and how it just, started really grabbing my interest. That's one of them. You got Psalm 40 and 6, way different from, what was quoted in the book of Hebrews chapter 10. I want to go back to that again so you can see that. That was Hebrews chapter 10, and that was verse 5. Wherefore, when he comes into the world, he says, sacrifice and offering thou wouldest not, but a body thou hast prepared for me. That is not the same thing. So what actually happened that um made me started to look into the Septuagint, and also, the rest of the people in the congregation. It wasn't just me, but we actually, after church one night, we all, started doing a Bible quiz that we found on YouTube. And so we're like, yeah, let's just test our Bible knowledge. And, we ended up putting on this Bible quiz video, and I'm going to put it on the screen so you can see it for yourself. Um, it's titled All About the Bible Trivia, Bible Quiz, Trivia Questions and Answers, with Bible reference. The question was number 15, but I'm going to go back and show you, how this all transpired. See, all about the Bible, trivia quiz, real nicely made video. Hi there, welcome back. So I had 20 questions on there. Pretty decent, it's like type questions. Question 1, how many books are in the Bible? Got all these questions, but I'm gonna skip down to the 15th question. Question number 15 is what shocked us all. Okay, it says, which of the following books never mention God? I'm gonna pause this. Which of the following books never mention God? I really started scratching my head at that moment. It says A, Esther, B, Ezra, C, Job, or D, Haggai. I was sure that there's none of these books could ever fit that that answer. Which of the following books never mention God? Is like, how can you actually have a book in the Bible that doesn't mention God? So we let the timer run out. See what the answer is. It says the book of Esther. It said the book of Esther was the only book in the Bible that doesn't mention God. So I'm going here on the right to the eSword app, and I'm going to go to the book of Esther. Okay. Here's the book of Esther. You got 10 chapters. Now I'm going to do a search in here. I'm going to go just to that book. I'm going to put in God. All right. Let me go into the book of Esther. I meant to do that there. Okay, so I typed in the word God, search the book of Esther, 0. Now I'm going to put the word Lord, nothing. So it doesn't even mention the word God or Lord in the book of Esther. And I was just shocked. I said, that's really shocking. You got Esther, and this is a time when the Jews were going to be exterminated by the Persians, by the Persians wanted to wipe them out. And I was like, how can you have a book that mentions praying, fasting, doing all these things, and there's no mention of God or Lord? Something just didn't feel right. So what I did was I actually looked back into the scripture but I went not into the Masoretic text. I said, let me look in the Septuagint. Go to the book of Esther in the Septuagint, and then I go search the word God. In this little app, eSword, you can search the book there, and it says that there's 8 verses found that say the word God in the book of Esther. I'll show you some really, really good examples of that, and then how you could look, and it's shocking how they took it out. So Esther 1:1 mentions God, visions of God. Esther 2:20. Now Esther had not discovered her kindred, for so Mordecai commanded her to fear God and to perform his commandments as she was with him, and Esther changed not her manner of life. So now on the left, I'm going to go to the Olive Tree Bible. I'm going to go into the book of Esther. And I'm going to go in that same verse, chapter 2:20. Okay, it said, Esther had not showed her kindred people as Mordecai charged her. Why did it take that out there? You see that? Put this side by side. This is Esther 2:20. Masoretic text on the left, the Greek Septuagint on the right. Esther had not discovered a kindred, for so Mordecai commanded her to fear God and to perform his commandments. Esther had not showed her kindred to the people as Mordecai charged her. Esther did the commandment of Mordecai. It never even mentions God in there. But in the Greek Septuagint, it does mention God. Yeah, Esther 4:7, 4:17. All this blue here is stuff that was taken out of the King James, but was actually written in the Greek Septuagint. Mention God a lot. Mention God a lot in there. Here's another one. It's written in black because it's also, you can find it the same thing in the Masoretic text, Esther 6:13. So I'm going to go to Esther 6:13. You can compare them side by side. Actually, I'll go to that in just a second. Okay, so Esther 6:13. Over here on the top, and Haman told Zeresh his wife and all his friends everything that had befallen him. If Mordecai be of the seed of the Jews, before whom thou hast begun to fall, thou shalt not prevail against him, but surely shall fall before him. Okay, so here's that same verse in the Greek Septuagint over here on the right. And Aman, or Haman, related the events that had befallen him to Zosara his wife, and to his friends, and his friends and his wife said to him, if Mordecai be of the race of the Jews, and thou hast begun to humble him before him, you will assuredly fall, and thou will not be able to withstand him, for the living God is with him. See, they took that out. That was actually there in the Greek Septuagint, but in the Masoretic text, the same chapter, the same verse, they took it out. Why is this happening? That really made me think, okay, no, I need to go back into all these verses and check to see what was added and what was taken away. A lot of people are afraid of the Greek Septuagint because they're not familiar with it, but this is the older manuscript. It was older than the Masoretic text. If you want to find the truth, you have to go back to the oldest source. Okay, so let me go back again. All this is taken out, uses the word God. God's mentioned plenty of times. So 8 verses, 25 matches. And then also, like I showed you in the King James, it doesn't mention Lord, but then I could type in the word Lord and it mentions it 5 times, 25 times. Esther 4:8. He gave him a copy of the writing that was published in Susa concerning their destruction to show Esther, and told him to charge her to go in to entreat the king and to beg him for the people, remembering, said he, the days of thy low estate, how they were nursed by my hand because Haman, who holds the next place to the king, has spoken against us for death. Do thou call upon the Lord and speak to the king concerning us to deliver us from death. Okay, so this is the Greek Septuagint, Esther 4 and 8. I'm going to go back to Esther chapter 4 and verse 8 in the Masoretic text. This is what most people have in their Old Testament. Just about everybody. Okay, so he gave him a copy of the writing of the decree given at Shushan to destroy them, and to show it to Esther, and to declare it unto her, and to charge her that she should go in to the king to make supplication unto him, and to make request before him for her people. It didn't even mention anything about do thou call upon the Lord and speak to the king. It didn't even mention that. It was taken out. You got a lot of passages in here that really needed to be read the right way. Esther 6 and 1. So let's go to Esther chapter 6 and 1. Esther 6 and 1. Real basic. I mean, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that whenever something was written the right way, it makes more sense when you mention God. It makes less sense when you take it out. So here on the left, this is the Masoretic text. On that night could not the king sleep. He commanded to bring in the book of the records of the chronicles, and they were read before the king. Now this is a Greek Septuagint on the right. But the Lord removed sleep from the king that night, and he told his servants to bring in the books and the registers of the daily events to read to him. The Lord removed the sleep. The King James says the king just couldn't sleep. The original Septuagint, a copy from the original Hebrew, says the Lord removed sleep from the king. Why are they taking these removing Lord and God from the scriptures? Who is removing it? It's the Masoretic text. It's the newer translation of the Hebrew Old Testament that is not. It's not actually translated from the Hebrews, the Hebrew writings that came from Moses and the prophets. It really does matter what version of the Old Testament that you read. And there's so many examples that you could find, within the scripture that there's a lot of things that were changed and taken out that really do matter. I mean, you can go into, let's just say Acts chapter 7, Acts 7:14. Stephen, when he was preaching, he mentioned something here in Acts 7:14. It says, then Joseph called his father Jacob to him and his kindred, 70 and 15. Okay, 70. This is what Stephen said about the patriarchs, about the fathers that came out of Egypt. He sent Joseph and called his father Jacob to him and all his kindred, 70 and 15 souls. 70. Score is 20. 20, 40, 60. And then plus 15, 75. So here in Acts 7:14, it says that 75 people came out of Egypt. Now, we can go into Exodus 1 and 5. I'm going to go Exodus 1 and 5 in the Masoretic text. Let me just go here. And I could compare, I could put it side by side so you can see both of them. It always puts the Septuagint first because this is an older manuscript, and then the one on the right is a Masoretic. So Hebrews chapter 1 and let me see, verse 5. Look at this. This is Septuagint. But Joseph was in Egypt, and all the souls were born of Jacob 75. That's 70 and 15. The King James Old Testament Masoretic text, all the souls that came out of the loins of Jacob were 70 souls. They left out 5. You see that? The writer of of the book of Acts, which is Luke, recorded that Stephen said 75 souls, not 70. So we can clearly see that when they read the Old Testament, they were not reading from this newer version called the Masoretic text. They were actually reading from the Greek Septuagint because this is a copy that they had to read from. You also got another passage where it actually mentioned it mentioned the 75. I'm gonna go through a search on that real quick. Go back to Bible, go to the Brenton, which is a Masoretic text. Type in the word 75. Let me see. There's one in Genesis, I believe. I think it was in Genesis where I think it was like the very end. Maybe let me see. I have it somewhere in another Bible of mine where you can actually look at the verses and reference to that. Actually, I'm gonna grab it real quick. It's gonna bother me if I don't find it real quick. I'm gonna make sure sharpen all this. All right, so that was Exodus 1. All right, so if we find, I think it's Genesis 46. Genesis 46 and 27. Okay, here you go, right here. The sons of Joseph were born into him in the land of Egypt were 9 souls, and the souls of the house of Jacob came with Joseph in Egypt were 75 souls. Okay, so you got Genesis 46:27 says 75. Now, if you compare that to the King James Masoretic, they still only put 70. They say 70. No, it's not 70. Stephen said 70. They say 70. The Septuagint says 75 souls. So you got, you know, different verses like that actually show you that, hey, when the writers of the New Testament, when they were actually, quoting stuff from the Old Testament, they were quoting from the Greek Septuagint, not from the Masoretic text. If this makes any sense, I know, it's kind of like new waters for people to step in. And, I'm telling you, once you start looking into the Greek Septuagint, it is so amazing. You go back and look at these Old Testament verses that you're used to reading, and they make it so plain in the Greek Septuagint. And it's so easy to see Christ, like foretold and prophesied in the Old Testament when you look at the Greek Septuagint. But when you look at like I say, I like to call it it's like the NIV of of Hebrew scriptures. The Masoretic text, one, you're gonna have to research like who are the Masoretes. Why did they come up with this translation? Why did a lot of the Jews hate the Greek Septuagint? Because they saw that a lot of Christians, were actually, they were quoting from the Greek Septuagint. You got Jesus quoting from the Greek Septuagint. I'm gonna show you some more examples. Okay, so let me get out of the Septuagint. I'll go back to King James. Let me see. Perfected praise. Okay. Bible. Okay, so this is Matthew 21:16. Matthew 21:16. Let me put that on the left here. Matthew 21:16. Okay, so this is what Jesus said. Hear what these say. Jesus says unto them, has thou never read out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, thou hast perfected praise? Okay. Go to that LITV. It'll tell you where that was quoted from. I'm going to go to Psalm 8 and 2. Go to Psalm 8 and 2. 8 and verse 2. Okay, so here you go right here. Jesus said, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, thou hast perfected praise. Let's look and see what the Masoretic text says. Out of the mouth of babes and sucklings, you have ordained strength. Does that sound similar to what Jesus said? Does it sound exactly the same? Or does it sound a little different? That part's the same. Out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, out of the mouths of babes and sucklings, thou hast perfected praise. Thou hast ordained strength. I used to try to make these say the same thing or mean the same thing, when sometimes you could stretch it, but look at the way it was quoted in the Septuagint. The Septuagint here, out of the mouths of babes and suckling, thou hast perfected praise. It shows you here that even Jesus quoted from the Greek Septuagint. He did not quote from a Masoretic text that was written later. It was written later. It's not as old as the Greek Septuagint. It's not just the only thing that you can find in there. There's a lot of verses in here that you could see that was directly quoting, from the Greek Septuagint and not from the Masoretic text. That's why some of these passages, people try to look at, oh, the New Testament contradicts the Old Testament. No, it doesn't. The New Testament doesn't contradict the Old Testament. The New Testament, it's the Masoretic text that's contradicting the New Testament. It's not the Greek Septuagint. The Greek Septuagint is in line with the New Testament writings. I mean, there's so many different examples of that you can find where it's word for word from the Greek Septuagint, and it's so important that you go back and you read it for yourself. Like I said, I could show you links. The app where you can download the Greek Septuagint is called eSword. If you want to learn how to install it, I can show you how to do it. I think there's like a little price for the eSword app, but there is like once you go into eSword, they got like where you can go to Bibles. They call them resources, and I got this like, up here in the screen, like where you can go to. It's called Brenton's English Septuagint. You just like highlight it and then push download, which I already got it downloaded, and then it'll download that copy, and it's for free. It's not licensed, so hardly anybody reads it anymore these days. I really would recommend that people go back and read it for yourself. I mean, I'll show you another one real quick. This is something that Peter said in his writing. He talked about a royal priesthood. So you got First Peter chapter 2 verse 9. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. Let me put that verse over here on the left so that way you can see the New Testament quotation 2 and 9. Okay, so that's right here. And I'm going to go to where this was actually quoted from. This is quoted from the book of Exodus, chapter 19. Exodus chapter 19 and verse 6. Let's start at verse 5. Now, therefore, if you obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then shall you be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people. For all the earth is mine, and you shall be unto me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. Okay, so that's what Peter was saying in First Peter chapter 2 and verse 9. But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, peculiar people. That's all that was written here. But it doesn't look like it's saying that right here in the Masoretic text, the King James Old Testament. But when you look at that in the Greek Septuagint, look at how it's written. Now, if you will indeed hear my voice and keep my covenant, you should be to me a peculiar people above all nations, for the whole earth is mine. The whole earth, not just Israel, not just Jerusalem. It said the whole earth is mine. It belonged to God. He's the one that made everything. Verse 6, and you shall be to me a royal priesthood. See how in the King James it says kingdom of priests? Here it says a royal priesthood, a holy nation. That's exactly a quotation from Peter that he was actually quoting that from, from the Greek Septuagint. Also, here's another one. I'll give you another one so you can see it for yourself. I believe it's Proverbs chapter 28:31. Let me see. Let me see. It was, let's see, ungodly up here. This was Peter, uh, Peter 4:18, 1 Peter 4:18. Go to chapter 4, and then verse 18. And if the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? That's actually quoted from Proverbs 11:31. Okay, so let me go to Proverbs chapter 11 and 31, very last verse. But the righteous shall be recompensed in the earth, much more the wicked and the sinner. Sounds similar, but you'd be like, maybe kind of sounds like it. Let's look at that in the Septuagint, the Greek Septuagint. If the righteous scarcely be saved, where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? Where shall the ungodly and the sinner appear? That's a direct quote from the Greek Septuagint and not from the Masoretic text. That's directly quoted. But interesting, look at the verse before it. And this is Proverbs 11:30. For the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. This is a King James Masoretic text. For the fruit of the righteous is a tree of life. He that winneth souls is wise. That don't even sound like it even fits, because you read the Proverbs, it'll usually give you like a compare and contrast, like opposites. It says in the Greek Septuagint, out of the fruit of righteousness grows a tree of life, but the souls of transgressors are cut off before their time. Why did they switch that? Because they don't want to hear anything about judgment? The souls of transgressors are cut off before their time? You see how they're taking stuff out? You see how they're changing things? This is the original, this is the second oldest manuscript that you could find of the Old Testament, and it's saying something different from these newer versions. People are watering down the scriptures so that way it takes away our conviction against sin. That right there, you know, that's the quotation that was actually quoted there. Um, Let me find another one. There's another Sodoma. Sodoma. There's the book of Romans, chapter 2 and 29. Watch this. Romans chapter 9 and 29. I'm not good. This is gonna be the last one to share, but I really just want to just give you an introduction to looking into the Greek Septuagint. It is a very, very important thing for us to read the right, correct version of the Old Testament. So this was Romans chapter 9 and verse 29. And Isaiah said before, except the Lord of Sabaoth had left us a seed, we should have been as Sodoma and been made like unto Gomorrah. Okay, so this is actually a quotation from the book of Isaiah chapter 1. Isaiah chapter 1, and we go down to verse 9. I'm going to put this parallel side by side. This is a Greek Septuagint on the left. If the Lord of Sabaoth, You see that? Lord of Sabaoth? That's actually spelled exactly the same way that it's written in the Greek Septuagint. That word Sabaoth means Lord of Hosts. It's like the Greek transliteration of the way you say Lord of Hosts in Hebrew is Adonai Sevaot. So they're saying Lord of Sabaoth or Sebaot. If the Lord of Sebaot or Sabaoth had not left us a seed, that's what it says right there. That was Paul's quotation. He quoted from the Greek Septuagint. We had been as Sodoma. You see that? Sodom? We would have been like unto Gomorrah. I know here it didn't say Sodoma, but the next one it actually says it Sodoma. That's the actual same spelling how they did it in the Septuagint. Been made like unto Gomorrah. Look at Gomorrha. Same way, same spelling. And then in the next verse, you got the same thing that Sodoma with the A at the end of Sodom. It's the same thing. Very, very similar, identical. These are hints that they were actually showing us. They were quoting from the Greek to Septuagint and not from a corrupt Masoretic text that was meant to water down or, disprove that Jesus was a Messiah. You got so much proof. You want to read the Old Testament correctly, make sure you read the Greek Septuagint. It will open your understanding to hundreds and like thousands of verses that, were it's so much purer to read an older manuscript, and you'll see the difference when you start to read it and search it out for yourself. It gets really addicting because then you're like, okay, let me go back in the Old Testament, let me reread these favorite verses I had, and I'm telling you, it's so exciting to be so hungry for God's word again and to see it and to read it the correct way. So that's all I'm going to share for you right now. I just wanted just to give you, somewhat of a introduction of the Greek Septuagint. It's called the Brenton and the eSword. Download it. If you have any questions, leave some comments in the below, and if there's anybody that's interested in it, you need some help, I'll walk you through it and make a video for that. Just want to say thank God for His Word. Thank God that He never changes, and I'm gonna keep being steadfast in the apostle doctrine and share more good content. Just to encourage you to stay on the straight and narrow path. Man, grace and peace be multiplied unto you.